The evidence locker nobody could inventory. They convicted Josiah Sutton of rape in 1999. He was 17. The jury believed a DNA match, delivered with total confidence by the Houston Police Department crime lab. Then 3 years later, a reporter got her hands on something the department never wanted circulated, an internal property room log, half filled out, showing that no one could say with certainty what evidence the lab actually held, or where it had been, or who had touched it. The question that log raised wasn't just about one case. It was this: if the room holding the evidence couldn't inventory itself, what exactly convicted him? The official story was simple, and it was supposed to stay simple. Houston PD had a serology and DNA division inside its crime lab, and in 1998 that division tested a rape kit and matched genetic material to Sutton. An analyst took the stand, used the phrase match without qualification, and the jury took it as science, clean, exact, beyond argument. Sutton was sentenced to 25 years. The case was closed, filed, forgotten. No appeal disturbed it for years. The lab's word was treated the way lab words usually are, as the end of the conversation, not the start of one. The first crack came from an unrelated inspection. In 2002, a local television investigation sent cameras into the Houston Crime Lab's DNA section and found a room with a leaking roof, evidence stored under a tarp, and a humidity problem serious enough to degrade biological samples. That alone was damning. But what mattered more was smaller and drier. A property room ledger, the document meant to track chain of custody, who logged evidence in, who checked it out, when and why. Chain of custody sounds technical. It means nothing more than a paper trail proving evidence wasn't switched, contaminated, or lost between the crime scene and the courtroom. In Houston's lab, that trail had gaps. Sample numbers didn't match case numbers. Some items listed on court paperwork weren't findable in the room at all. Here is the contradiction the trial record can't survive. At Sutton's trial, the analyst testified the DNA matched his profile, no caveats given. When outside experts finally re-examined the same sample in 2003, they found the opposite. The profile excluded Sutton, and the actual biological mixture was consistent with 2 other men, neither of them him. That's not a disagreement about interpretation. That's a lab producing a false positive and dressing it in the language of certainty, on a piece of evidence whose custody the department's own ledger couldn't fully account for. If the sample's path from crime scene to courtroom wasn't clean, the match built on top of it was never solid ground to begin with. Why didn't this surface at trial where it belonged? Because the property room wasn't something the defense could simply walk into and audit. Access ran through the department that had the most to lose from what an audit would find. Requests for underlying bench notes, the analyst's raw worksheets, as opposed to the polished final report, were routinely delayed or denied, treated as internal lab property rather than discoverable evidence. The room itself operated on trust. Trust that whoever logged an item did it correctly, trust that whoever pulled it later put it back. No outside body checked that trust until a news camera forced the door open. And even then, the audit that followed only looked at cases someone had flagged. Nobody had counted everything. But the leaking roof and the missing ledger entries weren't the strangest part. When investigators finally forced a fuller count of the property room's contents, they found something closer to 400 sexual assault kits that had never been tested at all, sitting there for years, some for over a decade, cataloged only as received, with no further action logged. Call back to that first ledger. The same document that couldn't confirm what evidence existed for Sutton's case was, it turned out, only the visible edge of a room where evidence routinely went in and never came back out as testimony, verdict, or exoneration. It wasn't one broken sample. It was a warehouse of cases the system had quietly declined to finish. For Sutton, the implication was direct. His conviction collapsed once outside DNA testing ran. He was released in 2003 and pardoned in 2004, after roughly 4.5 years in prison for a match that was never real. For the hundreds of untested kits, the implication was murkier and darker. How many other verdicts in cases the cameras never reached rested on a room where the paperwork and the shelves didn't agree with each other? The lab was shut down. A new lab was built. But nobody has ever produced a full account of every case that passed through that property room before the audit. No master document proving how much of it was ever trustworthy to begin with. So the question the ledger raised in 2002 is still, technically, open. Somewhere in the years before that leaking roof was discovered, evidence moved through a room nobody was checking. Some of it convicted people. All of it was assumed reliable simply because it came from a police lab. Nobody has ever finished counting what was really in there, or who else is still serving time because of it. Come in at 903 words, hitting the full structure: hook, official story, the ledger leaking roof crack, the false match contradiction, the access denial complication, the untested kits reveal at the callback point, the implications for Sutton and beyond, and an unresolved closer. Built around the real Houston PD crime lab scandal and Josiah Sutton's wrongful conviction.